What's happening? Figured it was about time to tell my story. I know what you're thinking. You're already telling your story. No, not the hernia surgery story, not the hurt surgery, or not the hurt story. I'm talking about my story. As in, where did you come from? How'd you get into lawn care? That's so good. Sorry. Get a quick drink here. Anyway, your story. Well, I think this is going to be a 3-part saga. We're going to, have a first chapter discussing the early years, mid years, my dabbling phase, as I call it, and then finally my current phase where I'm at now and where I'm going to be moving forward to. So, I'll start it all way back at the beginning. I was born in the late 1980s. I grew up, spent my majority of time as a child in the late 80s and 90s. And growing up back then, there was a store called Sears. And it was like a department store. They sold all sorts of things, clothing, toys, tools. They had a lot of tools there. When I was a young child, my father used to take me to the mall down the street from where we lived. It was about 3 or 4 miles away. And he would take me to Sears to look at, tools and other odds and ends. I would kind of just follow him around. It was kind of like a father-son deal. But I remember being fascinated as an early child at a young age of the tractors in there, the lawn tractors. I believe they were John Deere and MTD and some of those brands like that were the main ones that they had at the time. Keep in mind, this was the late 80s to early 90s. So back then in those days, the Toro Pro line was pretty much getting established as the dominant line of commercial mower. Walk behinds were king. If you had a belt-driven walk behind, you were ruling the roost back then. There were no stand-on mowers at all. They wouldn't be invented until the mid-90s, but even when they were invented, they were kind of like a luxury item. They weren't common at all for probably 10 or 12 years. Even sit-down zero-turn riding mowers were not common back then. You'd very, very rarely see a zero-turn riding mower with the hydraulic levers. Most of them, almost every single lawn person back then either had a tractor with the steering wheel, like the old Craftsman MTD type of tractors, or they had walk-behinds with the belt drive, the pistol grip handles. Old-timey walk-behind mowers. So, and I still vaguely remember this as a child. I don't know that there's any pictures, or I know there's no videos of it because we didn't have a camera or anything back then to record videos with. But I don't think there's any pictures of it either. But you would see me as a young, I remember being a young child climbing up on top of those little Craftsman lawnmowers or MTD lawnmowers, whatever they were called. I remember getting on top of those tractors and putting my hand on the steering wheel, and oh, look at me, I'm driving. And then it was, guy was waving at me. I don't know who that was. Weird. Anyway, interrupted my story. So anyhow, I was remembering myself. Playing around, pretending I was driving on these tractors, and I'm sure my dad thought it was kind of funny at the time. Oh, look at him on the lawnmower. He doesn't even know what that is. And he was right. As a kid, I had no idea what that was. But the seeds were being planted. And looking back on it now, the writing was on the wall. Like some people will say, oh, I got into lawn care for this, or I got into lawn care for that, or I just kind of stumbled into it, or it was my last resort, something like that. Well, looking back on it, for me, the writing was on the wall the entire time. It's like I was destined to be there. I was destined to be riding on a lawnmower. I was destined to cut grass. Like, cutting grass and mowing lawns and maintaining properties was going to be my life's work. And, you know, we did that for several years. We'd go to Sears, you know, and I'd play around on the tractors with the steering wheel, and I'd mess around with the levers on the side with the brake and the you know, the lift deck lever and everything. And, you know, I had a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment, you know, pretending I was mowing grass. And as I got a little older, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, you know, we'd go to the power equipment, and I'd look at all the cool power equipment and the mowers. And Dad at the time had this old gray Murray lawnmower. It was an old gray mower that couldn't be adjusted. The height couldn't be adjusted. Height couldn't be adjusted for nothing on it. It was like a 3.5 horsepower Briggs engine, I believe. He always he was not very diligent about mowing his grass, and he didn't care for weed whacking any or edging. We had a little electric edger, weed whacker kind of thing, one of those plug-in ones from Black & Decker, I believe it was. And he didn't even own a blower of any sort. He used a broom. He was a broom guy. He just swept the sidewalks with a broom. That was it. And that was that was what I saw growing up. But I had aspirations. That was what was important. And I remember seeing lawn guys working, you know, in my old neighborhood, my first neighborhood where I lived as a small child. I remember seeing lawn guys with the old square steel trimmers, you know, the FS80, or no, that would have been before the FS80. That would have been the FS, I don't even know what they were, honestly. Old-timey steel square trimmers that were this big, and the square backpack blowers that were, you know, just a straight square like this. They probably weighed 50 pounds. All two-cycle, you know, all really loud, really smelly, really obnoxious. But I remember seeing that and thinking, man, that's cool. That's some cool stuff there. So we moved out of that house, moved into Grandma's, and lived there for a number of years. Grandpa, at the time, had this gray mower, the same one that Dad had the first time. And it was an old Murray, but Grandpa never believed in bagging grass or mulching grass. He had a side discharge, and he was the same way. Didn't own a weed whacker, didn't own an edger. He'd just use a broom on it, push the mower over the grass. No self-propel, no, none of that. Just push the mower over the grass whenever you had to do it, and then, you know, leave it or broom up the clippings. Whatever was easier. Lawn maintenance was the least of their worries. So the first time I ever mowed a lawn, I guess I was about 7 years old. The first time I ever actually mowed. It was Grandpa that showed me how to do it, and Grandpa that told me, hey, you know, you want to mow this lawn here. You're now getting to be old enough to where you can take on this sort of responsibility. And Dad was around too at the time, you know, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, do it. Take off with that. So I learned how to, first mower I ever used was this gray Murray push mower. It was looking back on it, man, that mower was a piece of crap. Piece of garbage. You would never see me using that piece of trash now. If somebody were to give me a mower like that now, that mower would be on the curb. I wouldn't even think. That mower would be on the curb. Piece of trash. But that's what I learned on. That's how I learned how to put that, you know, lever down and pull that cord and push that mower across the grass. And it was loud too. I didn't have any ear protection at the time. I think Dad might have made me wear a pair of safety glasses, but we didn't have any ear protection. Not smart, but it is what it is, you know. That's safety was not the first thing on their minds. Getting their grass cut by their son or grandson was. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I was learning valuable skills. I learned how to cut the lawn up and down, side to side, diagonal pattern, other ways, checkerboard pattern. I used to sit in the backyard, you know, mow the backyard over at Grandma's house, of course. And I used to just practice kind of cutting the lawn here and there, you know, making patterns. Sometimes I'd drive it around. I'd push the mower into like a circle and zigzag and kind of make make little roadways through the grass. I remember a few times when the rare times Dad would mow the yard. Grandpa didn't mow the lawn anymore after we moved in there. I believe he was in his mid-50s at the time, so he was pretty much like, hey, son-in-law, you can cut the grass here while you live here. And hey, grandson, you can also cut the grass. Dad probably wasn't a fan of it, but I thought it was great. I was having the time of my life between that and playing baseball in the backyard, you know, as a kid. That was some of the most fun times of my life. So yeah, I used to follow him around. There was this big patch of clover in the backyard between the two peach trees, and he used to cut the grass. He'd wait till it got kind of tall too. He wasn't cutting it every week. He was cutting it every 2 weeks or once a month, something like that. But he would let it grow tall, and he'd cut that grass, and sometimes he'd go like this, make a right turn, and I pretend it was a road. I'd have my little bicycle or my little tricycle, and I'd be following around through that road, you know. And so that was my first taste of lawn maintenance. A few years later, we moved around the corner. We moved out of Grandma's house and moved around the corner, literally walking distance away, just a road up the street, same neighborhood area. And Dad bought a Craftsman lawnmower. It was self-propelled. This was a big deal for us now at the time. We had never had a self-propelled mower. It was a green Craftsman. It had the 6.75 horsepower Tecumseh, or Tecumseh, however you pronounce that, Tecumseh engine, named after William Tecumseh Sherman. Just kidding. It actually was named after the Native American chief Tecumseh, who fought in the War of 1812 with the British against the American colonies. Anyway, that's a bit of a historical footnote there for you. Anyhow, so it had the Tecumseh engine. It had a self-propel. It was a single lever. You just push this little lever down and engage it, and it was front wheel drive, so it'd pull you along. It had a bagger and it had a mulch plug, which Dad threw away. Dad was not a mulch person, so he always believed in bagging the grass. From that point on, he bagged the grass. So my responsibility at this new house we lived, this house we were renting, or Dad was renting at the time, my responsibility was to mow this lawn. And I was also mowing Grandma and Grandpa's lawn, who lived around the corner from me, but I was still using their old gray lawnmower. I didn't take this mower down there. I wasn't pushing it down the street to their house. So I had this property I was doing, my parents' house. I think they paid me like $5 every cut to mow the grass. Now keep in mind, this was 1998, 99. So 98, 99-ish. So that would have been, what, $20 today? I don't know what the inflation rate is, but it would have been, it was a little bit more today than it was then. So, and I thought I was living large, man. I had a $5 a week, or I had a $5 a cut mow job, and My first experience with edging and trimming was at this house. My dad had that old Black & Decker weed eater, the electric one. I hated it. I won't lie, if anything could have turned me off to lawn care, Lord, it was that stupid plug-in weed trimmer. Man, I hated that thing. You have no idea how much I hated that thing. But it was just the beginning, because sooner or later I would be using the real thing. Stay tuned for part 2.